September has gone better than expected so far, even with a 3% increase compared to last year. Although everyone said that September could be the worst month, September has actually gone quite well so far. We're going to take a quick look at Bitcoin now, talk a bit about the current market phase, and then we'll discuss in detail what's going to be important in the coming months. Because over the next few weeks and months, there are definitely a few points we need to talk about that could have a significant impact on the market. In the short term, we've finally broken out with Bitcoin here, but in doing so, we've left a CME gap behind. You can see it here, we have a CME gap, which could definitely get filled again. That's definitely possible, especially since there's a lot of liquidity there as well. At $107,000, there's a lot of liquidity for Bitcoin again. Down here, it's also interesting because we have a great support zone here. It will probably hold, but right now it looks like this is our bottom and that we're now building higher lows, which would indicate an uptrend, and that's definitely very, very good at the moment. Let's just hope we can maintain this momentum. It'll get really interesting if we break above here. If we get above $118,000, then of course we'll have picked up a lot of liquidity along the way, and if we manage to break above that now, it would also suggest that we're setting new all-time highs. We were simply in a downtrend the whole time here, because in a downtrend, that's typically how it goes. You drop, rise a bit, drop, rise a bit, drop. So you keep making lower lows. But this here isn't a lower low. We've found good support here, and we would break this downtrend if we move above this level, because the market structure makes it clear this was our high from this downtrend. And if we get above that, we've broken the downside momentum and would be back in an uptrend. So right now, things remain exciting. Down here, we also have another CME gap. On the liquidation heat map, there are still a few specific zones that could be targeted, but I'm keeping a close eye on the $118,000 mark and the $107,000 mark. We must not break below those levels in a sustained way either. And even though in September we actually saw more or less a stagnation in Bitcoin ETF inflows, we can still say the month went pretty well. So better than expected. Historically, September is actually the worst month. But every time we've had a good September, the following months have also been pretty good, at least when you compare it to the past. What you have to say either way is that October and November are by far the best 2 months. So on average, these are definitely the best months we have here. Let's just hope that's the case again this time. Because now in October, further interest rate cuts are already being priced in, and in December of this year, another 25 basis points are also being priced in. Those are already two very good things. Interest rate cuts are definitely very good and very valuable in this regard. US core inflation remains stable at 2.9%, so the US economy looks more or less solid. We're just not out of the woods yet. We definitely still have a way to go here. Right now, we just need a bit more security again. That's also the reason why gold and silver have risen so much lately, because right now there are still some uncertainties in the US economy. And it looks like there's a very high probability we'll see a US government shutdown this year. A government shutdown occurs when Congress and the president fail to pass a new budget law in time. If they can't reach an agreement there, then the federal government is shut down. We've had situations like this several times in the past, including the last time when Trump was president, and right now it really looks like we're going to see this happen again in the US. This just shows once again that there are still some difficulties in the US and that there is still no agreement. Accordingly, as I said, we have risk assets like gold and silver that are currently performing well. And yesterday I showed you the ISM, which simply reflects the US economy, where we could also clearly see that Bitcoin has often followed the ISM quite closely. And I told you, if that's the case again this time, it means that this cycle is shifting a bit further back. Of course, this is all just a theory and you never really know how things will turn out. But according to the ISM, which is entirely based on macroeconomics, that could very well be the case, which in the end isn't a bad thing. You have to look at it positively. If the cycle stretches out longer, we'll be able to reach much more impressive targets here as well. Because if we look at macroeconomics, it's clear that at the beginning of the year, the US GDP was struggling, but now we're slowly starting to see an increase here as well. To me, it kind of looks like we're now slowly seeing a recovering economy in the US. And if we look at the future forecasts for the US GDP, we can see that the projections look good. They all indicate that we can definitely expect economic growth here, and that's exactly what we want to see. And especially for future narratives, you should take a look at these charts. Guys, these are insights that are usually only available to VC investors. Some of these insights are only shared by banks with their private clients. And what I'm showing you here is really stuff that's genuinely high quality. Just like this chart, for example, which shows that in the past 3 years, significantly less money has been spent on office buildings. Meanwhile, we're seeing a huge boom in data centers, and that's in a ratio of 45 billion to 41 billion. So you could basically say that each year 41 billion is spent on new data centers, while only $45 billion are being spent on new office buildings. This means that investors are increasingly putting money into new data centers for AI and digitalization, while traditional office space is losing significance. And that's also a bit of the negative development of AI, but we can take advantage of it if we already have this data now. We can see that everything is moving towards AI. Companies are already investing much less money in offices because they have fewer and fewer employees. Everything is being focused on AI. But we can take advantage of this if we already know about it now and invest in AI early. Just as I still believe that AI could become a huge narrative in this cycle, and then we can look at projects like Bittensaw or something similar. And especially with Bittensaw, I just have to say, right now we really have a great buying opportunity. $305 is very nice. I already told you weeks ago, when we were still just under $400, that if we went back towards $300 and dropped below $300 again, that's exactly where I would buy in. We're currently pretty low, maybe we'll drop below $300 again, but even $305 is a great entry, you just have to say. At this point, I would actually even start accumulating or at least begin DCAing. And here we're only in an upward trend if we break through that, because as you can see, we've just been forming lower lows here. Accordingly, we've been falling lower and lower step by step. And this trend that we've established here will only be broken if we manage to break through properly at this point. As long as that hasn't happened yet, we're not in an upward trend. That's why this level here at $374 is crucial, but right now is simply a great time because as you know, I'm generally very optimistic about Bittensaw. Based purely on Elliott wave theory, we need to see $2,500 to $3,000 in this cycle at a minimum, but it could definitely go even higher than that. And another altcoin that's really been making headlines lately is Astar. Within just 10 days, it has overtaken every other cryptocurrency in terms of revenue. That's insane. Astar runs on BNB. That's also the reason why the BNB chain is pumping so hard right now. Yeah, it's really crazy what this project has accomplished. But Astar isn't exactly something revolutionary. In the end, it's basically just a decentralized exchange where, unlike other exchanges, you can still trade with leverage very quickly, efficiently, and cheaply. Because that was often the problem with decentralized exchanges. They weren't fast, had high costs, and just weren't attractive enough. Astar is definitely a whole different thing in that regard. Astar is basically the Hyperliquid competitor, just on the BNB chain. Hyperliquid runs on Ethereum. Hyperliquid also generates $2 or $3 million in fees here at times. Astar has now overtaken it at the moment. We'll just have to wait and see over the next few weeks because right now Astar is experiencing a huge hype. I'm curious to see what things will look like in a month or two because the big problem, or actually what's also a bit of a positive with Astar, is that nearly 95% of all tokens are held in 5, 6, 7, 8 wallets. On the one hand, that's a huge problem, but on the other hand, it's also the biggest advantage because that's the reason why Astar is rising so much right now. Because otherwise, we always have the problem that the wallets are completely distributed, really decentralized, as everyone likes to say, but then during every pump, people are constantly selling off. Some VCs who sell off immediately with every upward trend. Here, we simply have the advantage that the team holds a lot of tokens, but they're extremely optimistic, so they're not selling anything, and they even want to introduce buybacks. And that's kind of the advantage Astar has over other projects. The supply is extremely low if you exclude these wallets. The problem could eventually be if those wallets start selling, but right now, that's just not the case, and that's why this project has just skyrocketed overnight. A fully diluted market cap of 15 billion within 10 days, that's insane. In the end, this is the biggest Hyperliquid competitor, and from a technical analysis perspective, there's just not much I can say here. What I can say though is that Hyperliquid is still a top project in my eyes, and we also bought Hyperliquid during this dip. We bought Hyperliquid between $40 and $48 because I'm still extremely optimistic about it. Look at the revenue, the fees they're collecting. Just take a look at the project in general, check out the website. It's an insanely awesome thing. You have to imagine, Hype and Astar will both perform even better in a fully developed bull run, because the higher the bull run goes, the more people will use decentralized exchanges. That's always been the case, and it makes sense because a lot of people don't want to pay taxes and so on, so the more activity there is in the DeFi space, the better these kinds of projects will perform. With Hype, we were just recently at an all-time high of $60. If we break through that, we will also have broken this downtrend and would then be back in an uptrend, because right now we can see there's a bit of a stagnation phase. We had a double top here, and after the double top, we've had a bigger correction, which is also fine. It just depends on how things develop for us in the near future. But even so, HYPE is still one of the best projects on the market in the long term because it's a project that actually generates revenue, because it's a project where the token or the principle behind it actually makes a bit more sense. And at this point, as always, I want to thank you very much. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends. Bye.